Welcome to our Anti-Money Laundering training course. This comprehensive training course is designed to provide you with a thorough understanding of money laundering and terrorist financing. These are crucial threats that our industry must actively combat. Throughout this course, you will learn about the definition and identification of money laundering activities, understand the relevant legislation, and explore the AML measures necessary for you and gambling operators. By the end of this training, you will be equipped with the knowledge and skills to help protect your organization from the risks associated with money laundering and terrorist financing. Please note, these guidelines are based on non-statutory guidelines provided by the AMLCU. Where there is any discrepancy between these guidelines and the Criminal Justice Act 2010 as amended, the Criminal Justice Act 2010 as amended will apply. Before we dive into the specifics, it's crucial to understand the two primary threats that we aim to combat, which are money laundering and terrorist financing. Money laundering is the process of making large amounts of money generated by criminal activity, such as drug trafficking or terrorist funding, appear to be earned legally. It also includes spending the proceeds of crime on items such as luxury goods, or real estate, or further criminal enterprises. Terrorist financing can be described as the provision, collection, or receipt of funds with the intent or knowledge that the funds will be used to carry out an act of terrorism, or any act intended to cause death or serious bodily injury. So, we have discussed money laundering. Now, let's take a look at anti-money laundering and what it means. Anti-money laundering, or AML in short, refers to a set of laws, regulations, and procedures designed to prevent criminals from disguising illegally obtained funds as legitimate income. AML measures are implemented by financial institutions, gambling operators, and other regulated entities to monitor, detect, and report activities that might indicate money laundering or terrorist financing. As gambling operators are now designated entities, this means they must ensure that they run their business in a way that keeps crime and criminality out of gambling. Since the 27th of November 2018, the betting sector in Ireland has been covered by new AML legislation, contained within various pieces of legislation. This means that it is now a legal requirement, similar to banks, to collect customer information, which can prove age, identity, or funds verification for some customers. On occasion, information may be required before bets can be accepted or paid. You should familiarize yourself with your company policy in this area and understand how you can comply with anti-money laundering requirements when performing your role. There are lots of tools and measures gambling operators can use for anti-money laundering purposes. But the key measures include conducting business and customer risk assessments, including localized risks, carrying out customer due diligence and enhanced due diligence for relevant customers, ongoing monitoring of relevant customers, maintaining records of customer identification, transactions, decisions, actions taken, and evidence of compliance with the Act's provisions. Develop appropriate internal controls, policies, and procedures to manage and mitigate identified risks. Ensure that all staff are adequately trained on AML/CTF laws and regulations, and that they are trained to recognize and handle suspicious activities. And reporting suspicious transaction reports, or STRs in short. A business risk assessment is a document that assists in identifying where there may be risks in a business that could be exploited for money laundering and terrorist financing purposes. Once these risks are identified, operators assess how likely they are to happen and how severe their impact could be. Operators then develop strategies and controls to manage these risks using a risk-based approach. This helps them prioritize which risks need immediate attention and which ones can be monitored over time. Each licensed operator must produce and document a business risk assessment. Each licensed premises must have a copy of the business risk assessment stored locally, and all staff should be aware of its location. Risk assessments must also include risk specific to the local area in which the premises is located. Customer due diligence, or CDD for short, is the process of obtaining and verifying identifying information about customers to help a business operator understand the customer's financial activities and evaluate their risk of money laundering or terrorist financing. There may be times when you are required to obtain further information about or from a customer. When this is required, please refer to your company documentation for specific requirements, but they may include, for example, if you are working in a retail outlet, you will need to obtain the customer's real name and add the customer's name to your shop EPOS, customer tagging function. You will need to obtain a copy of the customer's photo ID and a utility bill, which must be dated within last 6 months, using the process outlined in your company policy. It may be helpful to provide the customer with an AML information leaflet or direct them to read the poster in the shop or a page on your website which contains the relevant information. It may also be helpful to advise the customer that this process is now required by law and applied by all gambling operators, not just in your business. Should the customer refuse to provide the information, you may not be able to proceed with the transaction. Please refer to management or your policies for further details before proceeding. Remember, if you are working in a retail environment, your safety takes priority, so stay calm and safe. Enhanced due diligence, or EDD for short, involves a more rigorous process than standard CDD to verify and assess the risks posed by potentially high-risk customers. It involves collecting extensive information on the customer's identity, on their source of funds and gambling activities, and continuously monitoring their transactions for any suspicious behavior. Situations which require EDD will depend upon the nature of the relationship with the customer, the type of business conducted, and the perceived AMLD4 risks involved with doing business with the customer. You should refer to your company training and customer risk assessment to understand exactly what is needed for EDD. Then, seek the advice and instructions from a senior or AML member of your team, but in general, it could include the following: obtaining additional identification information, understanding the customer's background, for politically exposed persons, or PEPs in short, understanding their public role and assess the associated risks, scrutinizing transactions thoroughly and continuously, and ensuring that senior management approval is obtained to continue a business relationship with a high-risk customer. There will be times when customers will require monitoring for some or all of their transactions. Details will be included in the training documentation provided by your employer, but in general AML legislation and guidelines requires the following at a minimum. Stakes or payouts of €2,000 or more must not proceed until appropriate CDD is conducted and appropriate documentation obtained and retained. When a customer places a bet of €200 or more, they must be monitored going forward for all transactions with a value of €50 or more after initial €200 trigger bet. It is important to ensure communication of new monitored customers to all staff. The customer must be monitored for a minimum of 3 months for retail operators and 6 months for online operators, for the purposes of identifying when a customer reaches the €2,000 linked threshold, and customer due diligence is therefore required. Linked transactions of €2,000 or more will be subject to CDD with source of funds established on a risk-sensitive basis. Please refer to your own policies for further details on this. Transactions can be considered as linked when the customer's normal betting behavior is identified, and any deviation from the customer's normal betting behavior could be deemed as a linked transaction. Deviation could include, but is not limited to, changes in bet frequency, value, odds, or type depending on the operator's own risk assessment and requirements. The definition for linked transactions will differ in accordance with the scale and complexity of each operator, and it is expected that licensed operators will define them in their risk assessment. There may be other circumstances in which an operator decides, on a risk-based approach, to monitor a customer or customers' transactions. Such circumstances will be identified in the operator's risk assessment, policies, and procedures. Here is an example of a possible scenario of when customer due diligence would be required. A new customer walks into a betting shop and places a bet of €250. As the bet is over €200, staff must now monitor the customer and all subsequent transactions of €50 or more for at least 3 months using the customer monitoring tagging function on your till. Therefore, the steps you should now take, at a minimum, include asking the customer for their name and add them as a monitored customer on your till. Ensure you communicate that a new customer has been added as a monitored customer to all relevant colleagues. Please follow your employer's guidelines on this. You must monitor tag every transaction of €50 or more for that customer, for at least the next 3 months. Or 6 months if it's an online customer. If the customer reaches €2,000 in stakes or payouts in linked transactions, CDD must be performed. There may be other flags or triggers that require CDD to be conducted prior to reaching €2,000 threshold. Please refer to your own policies or the other slides on this training course for further details. Tipping off refers to informing a customer or third party that they are under investigation for suspicious activities or that a suspicious transaction report, STR, has been or will be filed about them. Under anti-money laundering legislation, it is an offence for anyone to disclose to the person who is the subject of a suspicious transaction report, or to any third party, that a suspicious transaction report has been or will be made. This applies to all individuals, including employees, officers, and agents of the business. Violating the tipping off provision can lead to severe penalties, including fines and imprisonment. The specific penalties can vary based on the severity and circumstances of the offence. You might think that there is very little you can do when it comes to identifying or preventing money laundering as part of your role, but in fact there is a lot that you already do and can do. It does vary between retail and online operators, but your risk assessment and policies and procedures will outline specifically what you can do. In general, you should continue to know your customers as well as you do. When monitoring a customer due to their betting patterns, stake sizes, behaviour, etc., use their full name where possible. Always ensure everyone in your shop is using the same monitored name for the relevant customer. Be aware of any suspicious activity. Report any suspicious activity to your manager or relevant risk or fraud team. Obtain customer information discreetly and efficiently when requested by management. Provide customers with the information leaflet to assist them in understanding the new legal requirements, and ensure you understand and complete all the AML training provided by your employer. There are lots of indicators and behaviors you should look out for, and the list below is not exhaustive. It will also vary by product, operator, and operator type. So, in addition to the points listed below, please ensure you are familiar with your own policies and procedures. Indicators to look out for include unusual forms or patterns of betting, or a bet out of character from a known customer. Or, is there an unknown customer betting in substantial amounts of money? Or do you have a suspicion that the customer is involved in criminality? Does the customer appear to not care if the bet wins or loses, or is he or she selecting several runners in the same race regularly? Is the customer selecting a high number of non-runners? Or has the customer's stakes or winnings reached one of the AML triggers? Is the customer presenting with large amounts of cash? Or does it include large denomination notes, such as €100 or €200 notes? Does the customer or its beneficial owners have attributes known to be frequently used by money launderers or terrorist financiers? Is the customer reluctant to provide CDD documents or a satisfactory source of funds explanation? Is the customer's spending inconsistent with their source of wealth? Is the individual involved with a cash-intensive business, for example a taxi driver, shop owner, or fast food business owner? Is the customer presenting with foreign currency? Are there large amounts of funds lodged to accounts with minimal betting activity? Is their betting structured to avoid AML or CFT triggers, spreading bets across different outlets or brands owned by the same operator, for example? Or are they attempting to lodge and withdraw funds with different payment methods? Gambling operators must ensure that they report any transactions or betting patterns that raise suspicion of money laundering or terrorist financing via their online GoAML platform to the Financial Intelligence Unit, which is located in the Garda National Economic Crime Bureau. This is called making a suspicious transaction report. They must also provide a copy of the report to the revenue commissioners. Operators must make a suspicious transaction report as soon as practicable after they obtain knowledge, become suspicious, or have reasonable grounds to suspect that a person has been or is engaged in money laundering or terrorist financing. In your role, you should ensure you are completely aware of your company's policy in this area, and know when and how to raise your concerns. Factors you may consider when identifying suspicious transactions include: look for transactions that are unusually large, complex, and have no apparent economic or lawful purpose, including the items listed on the previous slide. Evaluate transactions based on your knowledge of the customer, their financial history, background, and behavior. And consider all information provided in your business and customer risk assessment policies. Here is another example for you to consider. This time it's in relation to suspicious betting patterns. So, if you had a customer frequently placing bets just below the €200 threshold, for example €199, whether in a shop or online, what should you do? The actions you should take include: monitor the customer's activity carefully and alert management, documenting each transaction and noting the pattern of behavior. Maintain detailed records of all transactions and any communications with the customer. Consider applying enhanced due diligence measures, including ongoing monitoring. Consult with your management or AML team to confirm requirements. If the betting pattern continues, without a credible explanation from the customer, the operator should also consider possibly ending the business relationship and/or filing a suspicious transaction report with the Financial Intelligence Unit and copying the revenue commissioners. Staff training is a critical component for effectively preventing money laundering or terrorist financing in any business. To comply with anti-money laundering legislation in Ireland, it's essential for all frontline staff of gambling operators to be fully trained. Licensed operators must ensure that ongoing training programs are conducted for all relevant personnel to remain aware of their AML and CTF obligations, risks, developments, and detection methods. Your employer must provide you with the relevant training and keep records of same. When your training is complete, remember the 4 Bs. Be informed, be compliant, be vigilant, and be confidential. Meaning: be informed, know the laws and understand why they're important. Be compliant, follow all procedures meticulously to ensure compliance. Be vigilant, always be on the lookout for suspicious activities. And be confidential, always keeping your reports and actions confidential. Compliance monitoring and supervision is another important aspect of anti-money laundering. The Anti-Money Laundering Compliance Unit, or AMLCU, is an official entity within the Department of Justice. It is responsible for ensuring compliance with AML and CTF regulations across various sectors including gambling operators, through supervision, guidance, and enforcement. The AMLCU compliance monitoring process involves regulatory investigators, authorized officers of the AMLCU, carrying out inspections of designated persons to ensure that they are meeting their obligations under the Act. Regulatory investigators may conduct announced or unannounced inspections at gambling operators' premises. The inspection itself consists of a meeting between the designated person or their employees and the regulatory investigator, during which the regulatory investigator will ask a series of questions of the persons present, relating to various sections of the Act. The inspection process also includes a review of the business's AML, CDD, and transactional documentation. These inspections are a routine part of compliance monitoring and supervision by the AMLCU and are conducted across all gambling operators. Please note, under Section 80 of the Act, a person commits an offence where they obstruct or interfere with an authorized officer in the exercise of their powers, or if they fail to comply with a requirement or request made by an authorized officer under Section 77 of the Act. This could result in a liability, on summary conviction, to a fine not exceeding €5,000, or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 12 months, or both. Understanding and following anti-money laundering requirements can seem overwhelming at first. However, with training and support from your manager, it becomes much more manageable. Here are some key points from this training course that can help you. 1. Know the requirements. Understand the AML requirements for your role by completing the training provided and knowing the business risk assessment located where you work. 2. Follow company policies. Adhere to our company's AML policies and procedures, especially those related to risk assessments, transaction monitoring, and customer identification. 3. Recognize suspicious activities. Be vigilant for signs of money laundering and terrorist financing and report any suspicions to your manager or designated AML compliance officer immediately. 4. Customer due diligence. Ensure you perform CDD and EDD when required, discreetly, efficiently, and thoroughly. 5. Ongoing monitoring. Continuously monitor relevant customer transactions. 6. Confidentiality. Ensure all transactions, actions, and customers' information is kept confidential. 7. Regular training. Participate in regular AML training to stay informed about the latest regulations and best practices. 8. Safety first. Ensure your safety and the safety of colleagues when dealing with compliance issues. Always seek guidance from management if unsure. 9. Legal compliance. Remember that non-compliance with AML regulations can lead to severe legal consequences for both the individual and the company. To conclude, by adhering to the key principles outlined in this training course, you help protect the business from the risks of money laundering and terrorist financing. Your diligence and adherence to AML procedures are crucial for maintaining a safe and compliant betting environment. Thank you for your commitment to these important responsibilities.